The third and final characteristic that we'll look at in the lab today, physical characteristic of the soil, is soil structure. Here to my right are three different monoliths. Now, a monolith is a vertical cross-section of the soil where we start at the surface and go down to some depth, exposing the different layers or horizons in the profile. We are not looking at these soils today from a standpoint of trying to determine where those horizons or the separations are or what other characteristics exist in these profiles. Rather, we're using these as examples of how structure might occur in the field. Now, soil structure is the way in which these soil particles adhere together into form semi-stable aggregates or clods. This is covered in Chapter 4 of your textbook, and to help you through this exercise, page 132 has some photographs of different types of structural units in the soil. So I would ask you, as I proceed through this exercise, to proceed to page 132 in your textbook and follow through this exercise on soil structure. Now, I've labeled these particular soils the Palouse, and I'll talk about it first, the Ritzville second, and then finally the Walla Walla. These each represent predominant soil series in Walla Walla counties. The difference between these is really how these soils have developed over time, the rainfall patterns, and the degree of weathering that has occurred of the minerals in these soil profiles. As we look at the first one over here, we're trying to determine what is the predominant type of structure within this soil. The Palouse soil has rather small aggregates or clods. This soil has a fairly high clay content, and we notice that it's darker in the surface. That's indicative of the higher organic matter content, and lighter, showing some yellowing and oranging color down in the profile where we have some oxidation of the iron that hasn't been masked over by the higher organic matter content as it has been above. Now, these have been preserved, so I can't break them apart to show you how the structural units would come out, which you could do on a profile in the field. But as we look at this, we see that they're somewhat angular or blocky in appearance. And when we look at the different types of structural units, at least the diagrams of those on page 132, we would take this soil and classify it as having a blocky, whether it's angular or subangular blocky is really not that important, but a blocky type of soil structure. Right at the very surface where the organic matter content is the highest, it would probably be almost granular or crumb. But down in the profile, this would be indicative of a blocky or block-like type of soil structure. As we look at soil sample number 2, which we're labeling the Ritzville does not have as high of organic matter content. It has a little bit more sand. We don't see the structure stability here. You can notice that this particular monolith, even though it was preserved at one point in time, we've had some pieces of this break out. For the purpose of what we're doing today, that's good, because what it does is it allows us to see more what the breakage or fissure pattern of the soil would be as we broke it apart. Now, especially down here in the lower region, like the B horizon or subsoil, we can see that we have some rather long vertical columns in this soil. This area was not as stable because of the higher lime content that it contained, and that's why it broke away from the monolith. But down in this part of the profile, these long vertical more column-shaped units, we would identify this soil as having a columnar type of soil structure. Now, that columnar type of soil structure would not exist up here within the zone of cultivation on the top. Also, because of the higher organic matter content, we would once again, probably this would break out as more of a granular or crumb type of structure. Finally, the third soil in this group is a Walla Walla series silt loam soil. If I haven't already mentioned it, all three of these soils are silt loams, the difference being this one has the highest silt content. The Ritzville series soil has a little bit more fine sand in it than what the other two do. And the first one we examined over here, the Palouse, being at the higher elevation and higher organic matter content, has a higher clay content. Percentages of sand, silt, and clay and organic matter content are what are really determining the types of structural units that are forming in these soils. This particular soil sample, we notice the organic matter helping hold it together up here near the surface. As we progress further down, Much of it is broken away from the monolith, but those pieces that are remaining are not as large as they were on the Ritzville, the columnar one, but they are elongated. They are sharp on the edges rather than rounded, like we had on the Ritzville series soil. And this one fits into a category which we call prismatic. Now, prismatic and columnar are subtypes of the same basic type of soil structural units. The difference being the columnar being more rounded, the prismatic being much more sharp and angular along the edges. This is only our initial look at soil structure in the first lab here today. In later laboratories, and especially under field conditions, we will be examining soil structure more closely, and in the lecture portion of the class, we will be looking at structure, formation of structure, what accounts for that, stability of structure, and why it's important for us to have good structure formation in our soils. So this is the conclusion of lab number 1. Today we have examined texture, determining texture by feel, color, those portions of the soil which impart specific colors to that soil. And lastly here today we've looked at soil structure, types of structural units that form, identifying structure from these monoliths, and knowing something about why good structure formation is important in the soil.